It's been sitting empty for 2 years, Isabel. What exactly did you expect us to do with it? My sister-in-law's voice came through the phone like something cold and flat, the kind of tone you'd use to explain why you'd thrown out a broken umbrella. Not a person's savings. Not 6 years of overnight shifts and missed holidays, and a mortgage I'd signed my name to at 23 years old, hands shaking slightly, telling myself this is it. This is the beginning of something real. I'm Isabel. I'm 29. I'm a software engineer, and for the last 2 years I've been working on a contract position in Dubai, infrastructure systems for a logistics firm that needed someone willing to relocate, someone without a husband or kids tying them to a time zone. I was that person. I packed 2 suitcases and a carry-on, left my furniture in place, and handed my brother a spare key and a folder of documents. I trusted him. That, it turns out, was my most expensive mistake. The condo I'd left behind was in Portland, Oregon. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors in the living room, a balcony that faced west so you could watch the sun go down over the hills in summer. I'd bought it when the market was still manageable for a single woman with good credit and a stubborn streak. I'd painted the bedroom walls myself, argued with the contractor over the bathroom tile, eaten a lot of sad lunches at my desk to stack up the down payment faster. That place was mine in a way that went beyond the deed. It was proof that I could build something on my own. When I left for Dubai, my brother and I had an arrangement. He'd act as property manager. The unit would be rented out. Nothing long-term, short-term furnished stays, since the condo was fully set up and I didn't want strangers living in it for years at a stretch. The rental income would cover the mortgage, with a percentage going to him as compensation for the hassle. It was clean. It was fair. I'd had a lawyer draft the management agreement just to keep things professional, because even with family, I believed in paper trails. For a while, it worked. He'd text me about minor things, a leaky faucet, a guest who left a wine stain on the couch cushion. Normal stuff. I'd ask occasionally how it was going, whether the unit was getting bookings, and he'd say, "Fine, all good, don't worry." I stopped asking as often after the first year. I was tired, and I trusted him. I stopped checking the listing platform as frequently as I should have. I had no idea that at some point in the months before everything fell apart, the short-term bookings had gone quiet. I didn't know my sister-in-law had started talking about opening a boutique. Specialty home goods, carefully curated, the kind of shop she'd been sketching out in a notebook for years. I didn't know she'd done the math and come up short, looked around at what was available, and landed on the fact that my condo had been sitting with reduced bookings and an absent owner an 8-hour flight away. I found out on a Wednesday. It was 8 in the evening in Dubai, noon in Portland, and I was sitting on my apartment floor eating leftovers and scrolling through my phone during a rare quiet hour. A text from my friend Flohim, and we'd worked together before I moved, stayed close across the distance. "Hey, random question, but is this your place?" She'd sent a link, Zillow, my address, my unit. Listed for sale. The listing had been active for 11 days. I had no idea. I sat there for a long moment with the food going cold in the container next to me, reading the listing 3 times the way you reread something when you can't process it on the first pass. The photos were of my apartment, my furniture, the west-facing balcony I'd painted the railing of myself on a Saturday afternoon with a podcast in my ears. The listing agent's name meant nothing to me. The price, $385,000, meant everything. I called my brother first. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. He picked up on the second ring, slightly breathless, like he'd had to think about whether to answer. "Hey, what's up? Everything okay?" "Can you explain to me," I said, keeping my voice very even, "why my condo is listed on Zillow?" A pause. Not a short one. "Oh, yeah, I was going to talk to you about that." "You were going to talk to me about it after 11 days. It's complicated, Isabel. You know, the short-term rental income has been inconsistent, and we were thinking... Me and my wife, we were thinking that maybe it made more sense to just liquidate the asset, and you could use the cash." Liquidate. I said the word like I was identifying something I'd found in the back of a cabinet, something that had expired. "You listed my property for sale without telling me. Without my consent. Without my signature." Another pause, longer this time. My wife handled a lot of the paperwork. That was the moment the temperature in the conversation changed. He didn't say it wasn't done. He didn't say I was wrong. He said my wife handled the paperwork, which told me everything. I hung up and called back immediately. This time, my sister-in-law answered. "Isabel." Her voice was already composed, almost bored, like she'd been waiting for this call and had decided to be done with it before it started. "Please tell me exactly what paperwork you submitted and to whom," I said. "We worked with a real estate agent your brother knows. I explained that you were overseas and that the family had agreed to move forward with the sale. The documents were submitted electronically." "I never agreed to anything. What documents?" There is no signature of mine authorizing a sale. A beat of silence. Then, there were documents on file from when your brother managed the property. We were able to work from those. I felt my stomach drop straight through the floor. You forged my signature. Isabel, that flat tone again. It's been sitting empty for 2 years. What exactly did you expect us to do with it? That sentence. I've thought about it so many times since. The presumption buried inside it, that absence equals abandonment. That because I wasn't physically present, my ownership had somehow softened into something negotiable, that what I'd built could be folded into someone else's plans because it was inconvenient for them to wait and ask. I didn't respond right away. I took a breath and I said very quietly, I'll be in touch. Then I called Flo. She answered on the first ring. I told her everything. The listing, the call, what my sister-in-law had said. Flo had worked in real estate compliance for 3 years before switching careers, and she listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, Okay, first thing tomorrow morning, you call the listing agent and you call the title company. You need to find out how far along this is and whether anything has closed. And then you need an attorney. Tonight, if possible. Do you think they actually pulled it off? I don't know yet. But Oregon requires seller's signature on a real estate contract. If they submitted something that isn't yours, that's forgery. That's fraud. That's not a civil matter, Isabel. That's criminal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and my phone, and I started pulling together everything I had. The original deed, the management agreement, emails between my brother and me over the past 2 years, screenshots of the Zillow's listing, a record of the last correspondence I had from the rental platform showing no notice of any listing changes. I organized it into a folder and sent it to 2 real estate attorneys in Portland before midnight local time, requesting emergency consultations. The next morning, I reached the listing agent. He was polite and clearly uncomfortable, and when I told him I was the property owner and had not authorized any sale, he went very quiet. He said he would need to pause all activity on the listing and contact the title company. He said he had believed he was working with an authorized family representative, that the documentation had appeared complete, that he had no reason to think, and I stopped him there. I understand, I said. I'm not holding you responsible, but I need you to stop the sale now. He did. The title company was my next call. The transaction had not yet closed. The deed had not been transferred. I was still legally the owner of my condo, but the buyer had already paid an earnest money deposit. There was a signed purchase agreement in the file with what was supposed to be my signature on it. I spoke to an attorney that afternoon on a video call, my phone propped against my water glass because I didn't have a proper phone stand. She looked at the documents I'd sent, asked me a series of specific questions, and told me what I suspected was true. The signature on the purchase agreement was not mine. The notarization attached to it was questionable. She'd seen similar things in fraud cases. She could help me file an immediate formal objection to the transfer with the title company, and she would recommend we simultaneously contact local law enforcement. What happens to my brother and his wife? I asked. She didn't soften it. If this holds up, and based on what you've sent me, I think it will, they're looking at charges, forgery, fraud, potentially identity theft, depending on what documentation they used. I asked her to proceed. I don't know exactly when my brother understood what was happening. I didn't hear from him for 3 days after my call with his wife. When he finally called, his voice was different, smaller somehow. He said he wanted to explain. He said my sister-in-law had been so convinced it would all work out that I'd be grateful once it was done and I had the cash and she had her boutique up and running. He said he'd let himself believe it because he wanted her to be happy and he'd been stupid. He knew that now. I listened. Then I told him what my attorney had told me and what had already been set in motion. He went silent for a long time, then he said, Isabel, please. She didn't mean for it to go this far. How far did she mean for it to go? I asked. Because she told an agent I'd authorized a sale. She forged my signature on a legal document. She planned to transfer my property to a stranger without telling me. How far is not too far? He didn't have an answer for that. What came next surprised me more than any of it. My sister-in-law, who had been silent our call, started talking. Not to me, to everyone else. She called my mother and told her I was refusing to cooperate with the family's financial situation, that I'd been selfish from the start, that I thought I was better than everyone because I'd gone overseas. She framed the listing as something she'd done to help, to free up equity I wasn't using so the family could benefit, and my legal action as a betrayal. She posted on Facebook, not about the condo specifically, but about being attacked by family while you're just trying to build something, about how working hard doesn't protect you from people who want to see you fail. Her friends flooded the comments. Someone called me a name I won't repeat. Someone else said family should come first. I found out about all of this from Flo, who saw the post because they had a mutual connection. Flo screenshot it and sent it to me without comment. I stared at it for a while, and then I forwarded it to my attorney as documentation. My mother called me 2 days after the posts. She'd heard my sister-in-law's version first, and her voice when she called was careful, like she was walking on something slippery. She said she hoped I understood that my brother and his wife were struggling. She said she knew I'd worked hard for the condo, but couldn't I at least have a conversation before going to the lawyers? I said, "Mom, they listed my home for sale without telling me. They forged my signature on a purchase agreement. A buyer put down earnest money on a property that was never theirs to sell. This was not a misunderstanding." She got quiet the way mothers get quiet when they're realizing they've been told a version of events that left a lot out. The formal objection went through. The title company voided the transaction. The buyer received a full refund of their earnest deposit and was given documentation explaining the fraud. The listing was pulled. My condo, my furniture, my hardwood floors, my west-facing balcony remained mine. The police report was filed by my attorney on my behalf. I submitted everything. The purchase agreement with the forged signature, the original deeds, the management agreement, records proving I had never communicated any intention to sell, the phone call recordings I'd made once I understood what was happening. Oregon is a one-party consent state. My brother and sister-in-law didn't know I'd been recording. Months passed. I stayed in Dubai because my contract wasn't finished and because, honestly, I needed the distance. I worked through the days, and at night I answered my attorney's emails, and sometimes I'd sit on my apartment balcony looking at a city that was nothing like Portland, thinking about all the versions of this that hadn't happened. The version where Flo hadn't been scrolling Zillow that Wednesday, where the sale had closed before I knew anything about it, where I came home to find my condo in someone else's hands and my brother looking at the floor. The case moved through the system the way legal cases do, slowly, with a lot of paperwork and waiting. My sister-in-law hired an attorney who tried to argue that she had acted in good faith consent I had allegedly given my brother in a phone conversation neither of them could produce evidence of. My brother, to his credit, did not back that claim up when it came to his own statement. He said he knew I hadn't been told. He said he'd let his wife convince him it would work out. He cooperated, which the prosecutor noted. My sister-in-law did not cooperate. She gave a statement claiming she'd been misled by the listing agent, that the documentation had been prepared by a third party, that she'd signed nothing that she knew to be fraudulent. The recording I had of her saying, "There were documents on file from when your brother managed the property. We were able to work from those," did not support this position. Neither did the forensic analysis of the signature on the purchase agreement, which did not match mine by any metric they tested. She was charged with forgery, fraud, and filing false statements in connection with real property. My brother was charged as an accessory. He pled down, she did not. Her trial lasted 4 days. I gave testimony remotely via video link, which was strange. Sitting in my Dubai apartment at 6 in the morning, dressed professionally from the waist up, speaking into my laptop camera at a courtroom 8,000 miles away while my sister-in-law sat at the defense table and watched the screen. She didn't look like she'd looked in the Facebook photo, the one where she was talking about being attacked by family. She looked tired and smaller than I remembered, and I felt something complicated looking at her, but I didn't feel guilty. I told the truth. I answered every question. I said I did not authorize the sale. I said the signature was not mine. I said my sister-in-law had told me in her own words how the documentation had been produced. The verdict came on a Thursday. She was found guilty on the forgery charge and the fraud charge. The sentencing came 6 weeks later, 18 months, with the possibility of early release contingent on restitution and completion of a financial ethics program. She would also carry a fraud conviction on her record. My brother did not go to prison. He served community service hours and paid a fine and spent, I assume, a very difficult several months watching the consequences of agreeing to something he knew was wrong because it was easier than saying no to his wife. They separated. I heard this from my mother, who had by then come fully around to understanding what had happened. My mother called me the week after the verdict and cried for a while, and I let her, because she was grieving something real, not just what my sister-in-law had done, but the version of her son she thought she knew. I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't quite. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. I told her we had time. My brother sent me a letter. Not an email, an actual letter, handwritten, mailed to my Dubai address and forwarded twice before it reached me, slightly crumpled from the journey. He said he was sorry in ways that were specific and uncomfortable, which told me he'd actually thought about it. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He said he understood if he never got it. He said he wanted me to know that when I came home, he'd be there if I wanted him to be, and he'd stay away if I didn't. I've read that letter more than once. My contract ended in December. I flew home on a red-eye, landed in Portland at 6 in the morning on a day that was cold and gray and absolutely correct for the city I'd been missing for 2 years. I took a rideshare from the airport, and I watched the streets I knew go past the window, and when we pulled up in front of my building, I felt something in my chest that I didn't have a name for at the time. My condo was exactly as I'd left it. Flo had checked on it periodically, made sure the short-term management platform was updated, kept it in rotation. The hardwood floors were the same. The bathroom tile I'd argued about was the same. The balcony railing, the one I'd painted on a Saturday afternoon, was starting to chip a little in one corner. A project for spring. I made coffee and stood in my kitchen while it brewed and looked out the window at the neighborhood waking up. A man was walking a dog. 2 kids in puffy coats were kicking something down the sidewalk. It was ordinary in the way that only familiar things can be, and I had missed it completely without realizing how much. I thought about my sister-in-law's voice on the phone. What exactly did you expect us to do with it? And I thought about the answer I had now, which I hadn't been able to articulate in the moment. I expected you to do nothing. I expected you to honor the thing I'd trusted you with. I expected you to understand that a person can be absent from something without surrendering it, that working overseas doesn't make you a ghost. That distance is not the same as giving up. I have been asked, since all of this, whether I regret filing charges, whether I wish I'd handled it some other way, kept it quiet, taken some smaller form of compensation, and let the family recover privately. The question always comes from people who want me to say yes, who would feel better if I'd traded my legal rights for the appearance of harmony. I don't regret it, not one step. What I lost temporarily, 2 years of stress and overseas legal fees and the gutting experience of watching your brother look at the floor, was real, but what I would have lost if I'd stayed silent was something I couldn't afford to give up. The condo wasn't just an investment, it was evidence. Evidence that I had built something myself, that it was mine to keep or sell or rent or paint or ignore on my own timeline, that I owed no one access to it simply because I had the audacity to live my life somewhere else for a while. I signed a new property management agreement last spring, with a company this time instead of a person. I updated all the documentation on file. I changed the locks, not because I thought anyone would come back, but because it felt right to start fresh. My brother and I have spoken. Slowly, carefully, the way you navigate a room after something in it has broken and been partially repaired. He is different than he was, or at least he seems to be quieter, more deliberate. He asks about my work now and actually listens to the answer. He brought food over once when I mentioned I'd been working long hours on a deadline, just left it at the door with a text. Didn't push for more than I was ready to give. I'm not sure what we are to each other yet. I think that's okay. Some things take as long as they take. Flo and I have standing plans for the first Sunday of every month. She was the one who spotted the listing. She was the reason I found out before it was too late, and I think about that sometimes. How different everything would have been if she'd scrolled past it without recognizing the address. I bought her a very good bottle of wine when I got home, and I told her that, and she said what any good friend says, which is, obviously I was going to text you. Who do you think I am? And I laughed for the first time in what felt like a long time. My west-facing balcony faces west, same as it always has. In summer, you can watch the sun go down over the hills. I watched it last July, coffee in one hand, the evening coming in through the open door, and I thought about how hard I'd worked for this particular view. How I'd stood in this exact spot before Dubai and imagined coming home to it. I came home to it. Nobody gave it to me, nobody took it, it's mine.